The battlefield smelled like burning metal, blood, and bad decisions. Sergeant Cal Voss groaned as he blinked up at the sky, or what was left of it. The once blue heavens had been replaced by a swirling, smog-choked nightmare, courtesy of the orbital bombardments. Something wet trickled down his forehead. Blood? Sweat? Both? He tried to sit up, but his body protested with the kind of pain that suggested a Xal'vorr warrior had used him as a personal chew toy. "Ah, look! It still moves," a voice chittered above him. Cal rolled his eyes, which took considerable effort, considering one of them was swollen shut. Just his luck. If getting blown up wasn't bad enough, now he had to listen to the oversized cockroaches gloat about it. A cluster of Xal'vorr warriors loomed over him, their iridescent carapaces gleaming under the dim light. They stood tall, each one a grotesque blend of insect and nightmare, with too many limbs and too much arrogance. Their mandibles clicked in amusement as they studied him, like a wounded animal they weren't sure was worth eating. "This one is the human-wolf hybrid," another hissed, prodding him in the ribs with a wickedly curved spear. "Fascinating. I expected something bigger." Cal coughed, a mix of blood and sarcasm bubbling up. "I expected Xal'vorr to be smarter. Yet, here we are, disappointed together." The warriors clicked their mandibles again, the Xal'vorr equivalent of laughter. Still has fight left. "Good," the leader mused. He was larger than the others, his dark crimson exoskeleton marking him as someone important. Probably the kind of bug who gave long-winded speeches about conquest before getting punched in the face. Cal wasn't opposed to making that happen. Just as soon as he could move again, his body was still struggling to heal. Normally, his werewolf physiology would be kicking in by now, sealing wounds and resetting broken bones. But their weapons did something nasty, something that slowed regeneration to a crawl. His muscles twitched, his bones ached, and worst of all, he couldn't feel his right leg. "Not great. You fought well," the leader continued. "Brutal. Efficient. For a lesser species. Flatter me more, and I might blush," Cal muttered, trying to shift his weight. "Bad idea." His nerves screamed in protest. The leader ignored him, turning to his warriors. "This is the best they have. And look at him now. Helpless. Broken." He bent lower, his many black eyes gleaming with malice. "Do you feel fear, human?" Cal smirked. "No, but I do feel annoyed. That voice of yours is like nails on a chalkboard." The leader clicked his mandibles sharply, and two warriors yanked Cal up by his arms, dragging him to his knees. His head swam from the movement, but he bit back a groan. He'd been in worse spots. "Probably. You amuse yourself," the leader said. "I wonder, will you still jest when I rip your limbs from your body one by one?" "Hard to say," Cal mused. "Depends on how bad you are at it. You seem like the type who needs a step-by-step guide." One of the warriors struck him across the face. His head snapped to the side, pain flaring in his jaw. "All right, that one stung." The leader sighed, feigning disappointment. "Such arrogance. It is why your kind will fall. You fight like beasts, but you are still prey." "Bold words," Cal muttered, spitting blood onto the leader's foot. "Especially for a guy with 8 eyes and no depth perception." The warriors bristled. The leader's mandibles twitched. "Oh yeah, that one got to him." Cal wasn't an idiot. He knew he was in a bad spot. His injuries were severe, his healing compromised, and he was outnumbered. But here was the thing about cornering a wolf. Eventually, it bit back. One of the warriors raised its spear, preparing to finish him off. That was their mistake. Something deep inside Cal stirred. A pulse of raw, unfiltered rage. Heat spread through his limbs, his muscles coiling like compressed steel. His heartbeat, slow and sluggish moments ago, surged into a furious drumbeat. His body, battered and broken, suddenly didn't feel so broken anymore. The Xal'vorr noticed. The leader frowned. "What?" Cal moved. 1 second, he was kneeling. The next, he was on his feet, claws slicing through the air. The warrior closest to him barely had time to shriek before Cal's hand was inside its chest cavity. Warm, alien blood coated his fingers. He ripped his arm free, letting the body slump. The rest of the Xal'vorr froze. For the first time, They looked uncertain. Cal grinned, teeth sharpening. Yeah, you were saying? The leader took a step back. Just a step. But Cal smelled it. Asterisk, asterisk, fear, asterisk, asterisk. A deep, rumbling growl rolled from his chest as his body continued to change. His wounds sealed rapidly, not just healing but strengthening. His vision sharpened, his movements felt lighter, faster. He flexed his fingers, watching the claws elongate, their edges sharper than before. Something was different. Something was new. The Xal'vorr warriors recovered from their shock, raising their weapons. Too late. Cal was among them before the first energy blast fired. He moved like a shadow, a blur of claws and fangs. One warrior lost its head in a single swipe. Another fell, its exoskeleton caved in by a brutal kick. Chaos erupted. The leader bellowed something in their language, but Cal didn't care. His blood sang with power, and these bastards had given him plenty of reasons to enjoy himself. A spear sliced toward his ribs. He caught it midair and snapped it like a twig. Another warrior lunged. He sidestepped, grabbed its arm, and wrenched it clean from its socket. For the first time, the Xal'vorr weren't laughing. The leader took another step back, then another. His mandibles clicked frantically. This is impossible. Cal wiped alien blood from his face, rolling his shoulders. Buddy, you have no idea what impossible looks like. The leader turned to flee. Cal was faster. His claws raked across the alien's throat, cutting deep. The leader gurgled, black blood bubbling past its lips as it stumbled forward, collapsing. The battlefield fell silent. Cal stood there, breathing hard, surveying the carnage. His enemies lay in pieces, the once smug Xal'vorr reduced to little more than a cautionary tale. He flexed his hands. His body still hummed with energy, but something about it felt wrong. Or maybe too right. Whatever had just happened, whatever he had just become, it wasn't normal. He exhaled, shaking his head. Well, he muttered to himself, glancing down at the corpses. I'd say that went well. A sound caught his ear. Survivors. He turned, locking eyes with the last few Xal'vorr hiding among the wreckage. They trembled. One of them whispered something in their language, barely audible. Cal's ears twitched. He understood it anyway. A single, terrified phrase. We should not have taunted the beast. He grinned. Damn right. Cal stood among the wreckage, his breath coming in slow, controlled gulps. The battlefield reeked of burnt flesh, ozone, and something distinctly alien, probably Xal'vorr guts. He rolled his shoulders, testing the strange, electric energy still thrumming beneath his skin. His wounds were gone. His muscles felt denser, stronger. His senses were sharper than ever. And best of all, his new and improved body was giving him a front-row seat to the sheer terror plastered across the remaining Xal'vorr's faces. The handful of survivors had frozen in place, their insectoid bodies twitching in uncertainty. The tallest one, a warrior with jagged green plating and an extra pair of blades fused to its forearms, clutched its weapon a little too tightly. He just killed 5 of us in under a minute, one hissed in their guttural tongue. And he's smiling. Why is he smiling? Because I'm having a great time, Cal answered, flexing his claws. The warriors flinched. The one with the arm blades took an instinctive step backward before catching itself. This is not possible, another chittered. The human should not be able to... Yeah, we've been over that, Cal interrupted, stretching his neck. I was supposed to be dead. You're confused. I get it. Honestly, I'd be pretty upset, too, if my entire tactical briefing turned out to be absolute garbage. The leader snarled, shaking off its hesitation. You think this is over, human? You believe because you have killed a few warriors, Cal was already moving. In an instant, he crossed the battlefield, closing the gap before the alien could react. His hand shot out, seizing the warrior by the throat. Sorry, what was that? Cal grinned, lifting the creature off the ground with alarming ease. You were saying something about me thinking this was over? The Xal'vorr struggled, clawing at his wrist with serrated fingers. Its mandibles clicked furiously as it kicked at his ribs. The strikes barely registered. You are an abomination, it hissed. Cal sighed. See, that's just rude. Then he crushed its windpipe. The body went limp. He tossed it aside, letting it crumple into the dirt. The other Xal'vorr recoiled, their confidence crumbling like a poorly made sandcastle. One bolted. Bad idea. Cal launched himself forward, closing the distance in a blink. Before the warrior could take a second step, he slammed into it, driving his claws through its back. The thing let out a choked scream before falling still. The remaining three scrambled into a defensive formation, backs pressed together, weapons raised. "This is not normal," one of them whispered. "This is not. You know, for an elite warrior species, you guys sure do a lot of panicking." Cal crouched, his claws carving shallow furrows into the dirt. His entire body felt coiled, wound too tight. The power inside him begged to be unleashed fully, to rip through them like a force of nature. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just fighting on instinct. He was instinct. "Stand your ground," one of them shrieked. "We are Xal'vorr. We are the apex." Cal tilted his head. "Aha! How's that working out for you?" They attacked together, moving in perfect sync, a blur of serrated weapons and fluid motion. Their coordination was impressive. Each strike was designed to corral him, to limit his movements, to carve away at his defenses bit by bit. Against a normal opponent, it might have worked. Cal wasn't normal anymore. He ducked under the first strike, sidestepped the second, and caught the third between his fingers. With a casual flick of his wrist, he snapped the blade in half. The warrior barely had time to register its horror before Cal's fist caved in its skull. The final two Xal'vorr shrieked in unison, lunging at him from opposite sides. One of them managed to land a glancing blow against his ribs. The other swung a plasma-coated blade straight for his throat. Cal twisted, grabbing the first warrior and using it as a shield. The plasma blade carved straight through its comrade's chest. The surviving warrior staggered back, hyperventilating. It looked down at its own blade, now dripping with its ally's blood. "You..." It trembled. "You let me..." "Yup," Cal said, stepping forward. The Xal'vorr tried to run. He caught it by the skull and crushed it like a melon. Silence fell over the battlefield. Cal exhaled slowly, surveying the carnage. His hands were covered in alien blood, his heartbeat still an unnatural, pounding rhythm in his ears. His new, unnatural body hummed with raw energy, but he could feel something beneath it, something hungry. He wasn't just faster and stronger. He was evolving. This wasn't normal werewolf healing. This was something else. And that was a problem. A faint clicking sound pulled him from his thoughts. He turned, locking eyes with the last Xal'vorr, a single survivor, crouched behind a pile of debris, shaking so violently its exoskeleton rattled. It didn't raise a weapon. It didn't try to fight. It simply stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes, mandibles quivering. "You," it whispered, voice hollow. "You are not human. You are not beast. You are." Cal took a step toward it. The Xal'vorr bolted. It scrambled away on all six limbs, abandoning its weapons, its honor, everything. It didn't care about victory. It didn't care about vengeance. It only cared about one thing: getting as far away from him as possible. Cal watched it go, rolling his shoulders. Normally, he would have chased it down, made sure there were no survivors. But right now he had bigger problems, like figuring out what the hell was happening to him. His pulse still thundered. His vision still felt too sharp, his muscles too powerful, his instincts too overwhelming. He wasn't just regenerating. He wasn't just healing. He was becoming something else entirely. And for the first time in a long, long while, that scared him. Cal stood in the middle of the carnage, breathing deeply, trying to steady the pounding in his chest. His hands were slick with alien blood, his claws still extended, and his mind was waging a silent war against the primal, wrong energy coiled inside him. His body had stopped feeling like his own. That should have been concerning. Instead, it felt right, and that was the most terrifying part. The battlefield was silent now, except for the distant crackle of fires and the occasional twitch from a severed limb that hadn't yet realized it was no longer attached to its owner. A fine mist of Xal'vorr blood clung to the air, staining his uniform, his skin, his teeth. He took another breath. It didn't smell bad. Okay, that was a problem. Well, he muttered to himself, wiping his hands on the nearest corpse. That got out of hand. A groan echoed through the wreckage. Cal's ears twitched, his new and improved senses picking up the faint, ragged sound of breathing. Someone was still alive. Not a Xal'vorr. This scent was familiar. Human. Pushing through the lingering haze of adrenaline, he followed the sound, stepping over crumpled bodies and shattered weapons. Eventually, he found the source. Lieutenant Darren Vale, pinned beneath a piece of collapsed wreckage, looking about 2 heartbeats away from giving up entirely. Cal crouched next to him, tilting his head. Well, look who's still breathing. Darren cracked one swollen eye open and let out a wheezing laugh. Barely. You look like hell. Cal grinned, flashing just a bit too much fong. You should see the other guys. Darren groaned, shifting slightly. His face was pale, and blood had soaked through his armor. Yeah, I got a pretty good idea. Heard the screams. Real comforting. His gaze flickered over Cal's form, taking in the still glowing golden veins along his arms. The way his eyes didn't quite look human anymore. So, you want to explain why you look like you just ate a sun and absorb its power? Cal scratched the back of his head, shrugging. Honestly, no idea. Something's off. My body's never done this before. Darren coughed. You mean massacred a squad of elite warriors in under 2 minutes isn't standard protocol for you? Cal smirked. It is now, apparently. He grabbed the wreckage, pinning Darren down, and lifted. The metal groaned, resisting at first, but then snap, It gave way like wet paper. Darren stared. Right? Totally normal. Cal hauled him to his feet, slinging one of Darren's arms over his shoulder. Can you walk? Define walk. I carry you like a princess, or you limp on your own. Darren groaned. Limping sounds less humiliating. Suit yourself. Together, they hobbled toward the nearest intact structure, a half-destroyed bunker that looked just stable enough not to collapse on them. Cal's mind raced. His body still felt too strong, his reflexes too sharp. And underneath it all, there was a pull, an instinct deeper than anything he'd ever known. It was telling him something. It was telling him to keep going, to hunt, to find more prey. He clenched his jaw, shoving the thought down. No, he was not losing himself to this. Not today. The bunker's interior was dimly lit, the emergency lights flickering weakly. Darren sagged against a wall, wincing. You should get checked out, he muttered. You're acting different. Cal leaned against the opposite wall, running a hand down his face. You think I don't know that? Darren studied him for a moment, then snorted. At least you're still annoying. That's reassuring. Before Cal could reply, a metallic chirp echoed from a nearby console. The comm system, barely functional, was sputtering back to life. A garbled transmission crackled through. To all remaining ground units, do you read? Evac Point Bravo, immediate extraction. Hostile reinforcements inbound. Cal exchanged a glance with Darren. Darren groaned. Oh, great. More bugs. Yep. You think you could take another round? Cal flexed his fingers. The power was still there waiting. Hungry. A slow smile spread across his face. Oh, I know I can.